Okay. Well, welcome to this talk about Othello. Um, some scholars have suggested that this is basically a story of Romeo and Juliet if it was portrayed as a interracial couple, um, which I think is interesting. Their love could survive petty family rivalries, but not the challenges of interracial marriage or prejudice. Now, if you've taken my course, you know that I'm using tarot as a theme. Um, so I've chosen this tarot card for the lovers um, because that's what Othello and Desdemona are. It's interesting that you can sort of see from the description of this tarot card there that lovers are characterized by innocence. Um, they are brought together by God, but kept chastely away. But let's not forget, um, no sin has been committed. They are pure, but there still is a snake in the garden. In a way, you could look at the story of Othello and Desdemona as sort of an Adam and Eve story, because they meet, they are in love, then they are tempted by a satanic figure, and their love is destroyed. The biblical allusions are very interesting to me, and they keep coming. Um, we've talked before in this course that um, the women in Shakespeare, some of them challenge. Some of them are strong and forceful and challenge unjust male power structures, but others are more passive. And I don't want to say that Desdemona is guilty of her own death by any stretch of the imagination, but I do wonder if Shakespeare wrote her partially as a commentary for how being the ideal wife, um, submitting to this patriarchal idea of the ideal wife, is actually deeply problematic and deeply hurtful for everyone involved, because Desdemona never does anything wrong in the play. She is supportive to Othello. She is kind and generous to everyone, and yet Othello still murders her. Why did that happen? I think throughout the whole play, she must be very confused, because she was probably brought up in this tradition of, if you keep your mouth shut, if you listen to your husband, support him, and are obedient and kind, things will work out for you. Yet in this case, it absolutely does not. Part of the, um, as we know, at the end of the play, Othello smothers Desdemona because he believes that she is in love with his lieutenant Michael Cassio. Um, and part of the and we'll discuss Othello's jealousy, the source of Othello's jealousy. A lot of it has to do with Iago, but part of it has to do with um, a sort of preconception that women aren't trustworthy. Maybe Desdemona is partially, um, maybe part of the problem is not Desdemona's fault. It's just that women were inherently distrusted by men in this period, and to a certain extent now as well. This quote here comes from her father, Brabantio, who, after she marries Othello without his permission, says, "Look to her more if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father, and may thee." I think that these words help sow distrust in Othello. It's interesting that, as I said, in all of Shakespeare's plays, there's one passive woman, in this case Desdemona, and one active woman, Emilia. And when the two of them are together, they are a good They have a great friendship, and and I feel like if the two of them were merged together into one woman, there's no way that Othello would have murdered her. And Othello knows to not let Emilia around her before he murders her. I think that she wouldn't have given him the chance were she in the same room. So Emilia is sort of an interesting balance where in some ways, she's my favorite character because she saw the signs of Othello's abusive and murderous intentions, um, and she suspected her husband. But at every point of the play, she's shut away from Desdemona and everybody who could have stopped this horrible tragedy. Amelia has a wonderful speech where she says, "Let husbands know their wives have sense like them. They see and smell, and have their palates for both sweet and sour, as husbands have. What is it that they do when they change us for others? Is it sport? I think it is. And doth affection breed it? I think it doth. Is frailty that thus errs? It is so too. And have not we affections, desires for sport, and frailty as men have? Then let them use us well. Else let them know the ills we do, their ills instruct us so." Amelia is demanding equal treatment. Why should men give free rein to commit adultery, to speak against their partners, to be jealous, um, and pursue their own desires in general, and women seemingly are not? They are higher scrutinized than men. So Emilia is sort of Shakespeare's commentary and a wonderful antidote to the passive acceptance that Desdemona has been spoon-fed her whole life. Now let's talk about Othello. The biggest controversy about this play that has been growing in recent years is the question of whether or not Othello is a racist play. The big question is whether or not Othello is a positive or a negative portrayal of a black man. On the one hand, in the first speech, he is eloquent, intelligent, subdued, and he shows a great deal of love and affection towards Desdemona. But let's not forget that by the end of the play, he murders her in cold blood, calls her all sorts of demeaning names, and Iago uses a host of racial stereotypes to describe Othello. So it is a problematic thing. Now, I know I'm biased. I'm more inclined to defend Shakespeare than to say that outright say that this play should not be read. But I'm going to try and present both sides from the argument. Here's that speech. I will send you a link to James Earl Jones, who famously played Othello. You can see that the text of the speech, I'll just read the first few lines. "Most potent, grave, and reverend signors, my very noble and approved good masters, that I have ta'en away this old man's daughter, it is most true. True, I have married her. The very head and front of my offending hath this extent, no more. Rude am I in my speech, and little blessed with a soft phrase of peace." This phrase is very interesting because, of course, he's not rude in his speech. This speech is carefully reasoned and argued. It is respectful and intelligent. Othello seems to be, it's very appropriate for a man who is educated, who is assimilated into Venetian society, and a general to boot, who is used to being scrutinized by those by his superiors. At the same time, this was a time period where people were getting very nervous from the oncoming influence of Moors, which is to say, people of African descent who mainly lived in Spain at this time. So they are Muslims who conquered Spain until they were forced to leave Spain and become Christian. Now, the England had fought the Spanish in the 1580s, and they were very concerned that these Moors coming in from Spain might secretly be Spanish spies. And so there was a great deal of distrust and fear of these Moors. Now, Moor, sadly, is a very broad and racist term. Yes, it can refer to Africans, but it can also refer to people from the Middle East. And one thing I find interesting about Othello, especially since 2001, is that he is, in all probability, a converted Muslim trying to live among Christians. So he is constantly being scrutinized, and especially since September 11th, when um, Arab Americans were constantly under scrutiny after the September 11th attacks. Othello is a very contemporary play for this reason. Because, in a way, people of Palestinian and Middle Eastern descent are still scrutinized in this country and still face a lot of prejudice. Now, this is a quote from a letter that from we're not quite sure exactly from whom, but it was somebody in the Privy Council of Queen Elizabeth who drafted a letter that was never sent, saying that the Queen was discontented with the number of Black people in Europe. She did not send this, but it does show that there was a lot of distrust and discontent. The image here, this is the Turkish ambassador came to himself a Moor who came to visit the court of Queen Elizabeth. His visit was heralded and was very and he was treated respectfully, but at the same time, he was also viewed with distrust. As I said, Othello is a converted Muslim. So it was very interesting to see this production from the National Theatre, which emphasizes that he is a soldier who is distrusted. It kind of sidestepped the racial issue and more focused on military culture and the stress and trauma that soldiers experience, especially in a place where their enemy has no particular home base, where you have to be ready at any moment to attack. Now, Othello, after he marries Desdemona, goes to the island of Cyprus, which is an island near Turkey and Spain. It was annexed by Venice, so it's a Venetian territory, but then it was conquered by the Ottoman Turks, Muslims. And so they fought against, and so Othello is trying to reconquer Cyprus for the Venetian Empire. But that plot point is quickly abandoned. They win the war extremely well. The real war in this play is between Othello and Iago, who, as you can see from this tarot card I've chosen, is represented multiple times in the play as a devil. He, partially because he is cunning in argument, he manipulates and tempts Othello with his own fears and desires, and he makes deals with Rodrigo and doesn't keep them. He promises Rodrigo that he will get to marry Desdemona. He doesn't keep that deal. He promises Cassio that he will talk to Othello and get him his job back after after Othello dismisses him. He doesn't. He's a liar, but he's a cunning liar. I'll send you you can also consult this video from the Folger Shakespeare Library about the satanic language in Othello. Let's move on to more descriptions of how Iago is devilish. He says, "Our bodies are our gardens, to the which our wills are gardeners." Sounds very similar to what the snake would say in the Garden of Eden. "Hell and night must bring this monstrous birth to the world's light. So will I turn her virtue into pitch, and out of her own goodness make the net that shall enmesh them all." Iago corrupts the innocent, like Eve in the Garden of Eden. And that's what he does to Desdemona. Iago spent the biggest question in the play is, why does Iago try to destroy Othello and Desdemona? It's another one of those things that Shakespeare leaves ambiguous. And so actors have to come up with a reason for it. Before I go on, I'd like to mention that I wrote a post about working with an actor playing Iago. And the poet Coleridge described Iago's greatest feature as motiveless malignity. In other words, he does evil for no reason, which is terrifying to contemplate, but it's unplayable for an actor. Actors need motivation. They need a driving want to make them pursue their goals. Otherwise, their performance will be very flat. There are many tantalizing clues to suggest what Iago really wants. And you can choose all of them or none of them or just pick one. Is he in love with Othello and lashing out because he can never have him? That would kind of suggest in a Christian society where homosexuality is frowned upon, it would explain why Iago behaves like he is a devil, cursed, unnatural. Laurence Olivier actually played him that way. Is it that he's in love with Desdemona? That's also entirely playable. He knows he can never get her away from Othello, so he lashes out and condemns both of them. Is he racist? Does he suspect that Othello is in fact sleeping with Emilia? It would make a lot of sense that Iago knows how to deceive and manipulate jealousy if he is jealous himself. But again, it can be played any of these ways or none of these ways. I said before this is a very contemporary play, and it's sadly a lot of it's because there are a lot of issues that the play touches on. Sexism, as I mentioned before, Iago manipulates Othello by constantly saying that women are unfaithful and disloyal, almost by nature. In Venice, they do let heaven see the pranks they dare not show their husbands. It also talks about abuse. Othello hits Desdemona, which, if she hadn't been so concerned with trying to be a good wife, she probably would have just left. In terms of racism, one way that Iago manipulates Rodrigo, getting him to side with Rodrigo, is by saying that Othello's too old and too ugly as a black man to keep Desdemona's interest. So he uses all kinds of racist metaphors and similes to describe Othello, describing him as having a sooty bosom. The saddest part of the play is that you can play Othello if he has a bit of an inferiority complex, that he might believe all this racist nonsense, that he is inferior to the white characters, and maybe his jealousy stems because he thinks he doesn't deserve Desdemona for the simple reason that he's black. Now, I want to be very clear, that is not true by any means, but it is entirely playable that maybe Othello thinks it's true. And that would be truly tragic. A man feeling he doesn't deserve the things he wants, and then subconsciously invents a reason why she invents a reason for her to leave him. Again, I think that Iago might be thinking that he is uh, that he has a bit of a fear that of losing Desdemona that's deeply seated. Also, so first of all, he believes that women are distrustful, especially Venetian women. He thinks that he's too old, haply for I am black, or for I am declined into the vale of years. Yet that's not much. I am abused, and my relief must be to loathe her. The If you remember in the play, all that Iago does as physical evidence of Desdemona's infidelity is just planting her handkerchief in Cassio's house. This is the flimsiest of circumstantial evidence. There must be some deeper reason why Othello trusts Iago when he says that his wife has been unfaithful. This is a quote from a psychiatrist, J. Thomas Harbin, in a book Beyond Anger, which I think is very relevant to Othello and to anybody who sees this play. When you assume you know what another person is thinking, you will assume that person is thinking negative thoughts about you. For example, whenever Othello notices his wife is not in a good mood, he says, "What's wrong?" His wife usually says that nothing is wrong, but Othello assumes that she is not telling the truth and that she is angry with him. He then gets angry because he assumes she is blaming him for something and that he didn't do. The garbage out mind reading is also frustrating to those around you. They can see you are getting angry with them, but they have no idea why. I put those. Obviously, he's not talking about Othello. He's talking about general men in general. But if you just change the word, it describes Othello's situation perfectly. Desdemona has no idea why Othello is getting more and more angry at her. But everything she does, because he's convinced that she is unfaithful, makes him more and more furious. Othello, of course, feels instant remorse after learning that Desdemona has been killed, and everybody mourns her loss. I feel that this play resonates for everybody. For men, it teaches us, and I want to be very clear here: white, black, no matter what your race is, we all have potential for jealousy. It is not inherently a thing that it is not an inherently racial issue. For women, it's I'm going to be careful. Women need to be careful and watch for red flags. They're not responsible for abuse, but I believe every woman has an obligation to protect herself and to not let men uh, destroy their sense of self worth. And and in a general sense, jealousy, if jealousy is inherently part of love, learning to recognize it and control it within yourself um, is something that you owe to yourself and the people you love. Again, um, the question is whether Othello is a racist or a non racist play. On the one hand, the way that Othello kills Desdemona and the way he is easily manipulated could be perceived as a commentary on the nature of Black people. On the other hand, the the pathos, the sadness that we see in Othello's journey, how he is sold to slavery, how he is put in an army that does not accept him, that he finds love only to have it ripped away by the manipulations of a jealous, horrible man. Perhaps that, and the fact that that has elevated some stars like Paul Robeson, one of the first American black men to play Othello, to stardom, says something about the fact that the role can be a positive interpretation. I suppose it really depends on how it's done. If it's done with care and with purpose and with a clear um, expectation for the audience, um, then it need not be a racist play. Now, if you take my course, there will be a video that allows you to. Uh, Sorry, there will be an activity where you get to have a little mock trial to see who is more guilty of Desdemona's death, Othello or Iago. I'll send these notes to you, and you can decide for yourself. But until not next time, thank you for watching.